Cool. So as Shannon said, this is our first week of doing Queering Feminism, inspiration from QT BIPOC activists. And QT BIPOC stands for Queer, Trans, Black, Indigenous People of Color activists. So hopefully over the next 4 weeks or whatever weeks you can come to, we'll be queering feminism together. We want to begin, of course, by doing an acknowledgement of country. And at the WRC, we think this is really important because doing an acknowledgement of country shifts our ideas of ownership and space of the land that we're on. And so right now we're occupying and we're all living, working, breathing from a particular physical space. And we would need to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and acknowledge that we might be living on stolen land if we're not Indigenous ourselves. And so a typical land acknowledgement typically goes like this. We would like to acknowledge the custodians of this land, the Kumeyaay people, and their elders past and present. This intergenerational work is really important in maintaining this relationship to the earth. We acknowledge and respect their continuing resilience and culture and recognize the strength, resilience, and capacity of the Kumeyaay people and extend this respect to other Indigenous people who are present. However, as part of our practice, we also recognize that we can go beyond land acknowledgements and simply saying, we honor you as the custodians of this land without doing anything else. And so if you want to know other ways of giving back to the Indigenous people or contributing to the welfare and maintenance of the space, this land, and providing reparations and appropriate ownership of the space that we're on, here are some links so that you can do that. And they're on our slide, and I can, or Shannon can share this in the chat. Perhaps if you like as well. And so here are other things. Here are the current day struggles that the Kumeyaay people are going up against with the border wall on their land. And then also if you want to redirect your financial resources or even your labor and time resources, there's a link to where you can do that. That Instagram account has a lot of different resources of, oh, if you have time to volunteer, here's how you can do it. If you want to learn more about the different causes that are impacting the Kumeyaay people today, here's how you can do that as well. And so we would like to encourage you to know whose land that you're on and what that means and what that culture is like, but also to go beyond that. Okay.
So who are we? So I wanted to give a brief background of the Women's Resource Center and sort of what we strive to foster here in our spaces, like this one. So we strive to foster a vibrant, brave, and inclusive space that educates, empowers, and advocates for women's rights. We also strive for a campus culture rooted in gender justice and feminist leadership. Also, what's really important to us is supporting students facing gender-based oppression. And we hope to provide a healing intersectional feminist activism and enhancement to students' academic, personal, and professional successes. So if you want to get more involved with us or hear more about what we're about, you can contact us through email at wrc@sdsu.edu or our Instagram page where we post information about all of our events. And as for who we, your facilitators, are for this session, as mentioned before, my name is Shannon. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm a first-year graduate student in the Women's Studies department. Specifically, my research interest centers queer theory and the making of LGBTQ identity. Just something about me is that I love basking in the sunshine, young adult fiction, and making playlists.
I'll introduce myself as well. Thank you for listening to us thus far. I can attest Shannon makes great playlists, or at least she has great music recs, and both of us like basking in the sun. I'm a second-year graduate student in the psychology department. My research focuses on stereotyping, prejudice, social movements, interethnic solidarity. And yeah, so that's a summary, I guess, of my academic profile, and both of us are GAs here, and we do a lot of, or our programming so far has focused on queer identity and feminism, so both passions of ours. Oh, go ahead.
Sure. Before we begin the session, we also want to go over just some community guidelines to ensure that everybody in the space feels comfortable. So the first is take care of yourself. So you come first, do whatever you need to do to feel comfortable, even if that is to turn your camera off, leave your camera off, leave the session, or send Celine or I a private message of anything that might be going on. The second is to respect boundaries. So what is said stays and what is learned leaves. So personal stories that people feel comfortable to share, that should remain in the space between the people that are here, and the larger lessons and stories of people that activists that we're going to be talking about, that is information that you learn that can leave and that could be spread to other people. The third is to challenge assumptions. So we want everyone to recognize that all knowledge is cultural and contingent on context. So we're going to try our best to not assume any base experiences or shame others for their experiences. And finally, if there's anything else, please let us know how we can make this space more comfortable for you as we move through this session and future sessions.
Cool. So we would like to get to know all of you a little bit more and or have a space to maybe check in, ground, in whatever way you would like to participate for the next hour. And so if you'd like to check in, we'd love to hear your name, your major, pronouns, and some of your favorite feelings. And if you feel compelled to share, feel free to do so in the chat or unmute yourself.
Hi, hold on, I'm gonna turn my camera on.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Maddie. I'm a first year and my major is ISCOR, so International Security and Conflict Resolution. My pronouns are she, her, and I've been kind of doing a lot of road trips recently because my sister lives in Santa Barbara. So one of my favorite feelings is like having all of the windows down on the highway when you're going through like the coast and it's all warm and sunny and stuff. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I love that feeling.
I'm happy to share. My name is Lori. I use she or they pronouns. I'm not in school, but I have an MA in women's studies, and I feel like I really like the feeling of like, I don't know, I like feeling a little bit dramatic, like when somebody gives me like a good piece of gossip or like something just like that I can just like hold on to and be like, ooh, I love like that little bit of drama that's like not, unkind or like, world shattering, but just like a little bit of interest and intrigue is something that I love to feel.
I'll go next. My name's Haley. I'm a second year kinesiology pre-physical therapy major here at San Diego State. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And honestly, one of my favorite feelings is like when you're at the beach and you've kind of been baked in the sun all day and you get that like cool breeze come across you and it just kind of relaxes you. That's one of my favorite feelings.
I can go. I already shared my name and my major and my pronouns, but I'll share my favorite feeling, which I think I've shared before, but my favorite feeling is when you're at a concert and it's like the mingling right before the lights go off and you're just kind of like sitting with your friends and then all of a sudden the lights go off and the music starts and the whole like auditorium just starts screaming. Like that is my favorite feeling in the whole world. And with COVID, I am really missing that feeling and looking forward to getting back to it.
I can go. So, hi, my name is Christina. She, her, hers. My major is in psychology, and I love the feeling of when your favorite song comes out, when you're listening to a playlist and your favorite song just comes out and you just don't expect, well, you expect it, but not really. And it's just, you just enjoy the music.
I can share because I realized I didn't share what my pronouns were. I use she or they pronouns, either or. Related to some of the feelings that you all shared, including yours, Christina. One of my favorite feelings, I'm gonna let somebody in from the waiting room, would be when you're driving down the highway with like all the windows down, like whether it's at night or down the beach. I think, yeah, Maddie, you're the one that shared that. It's just great. And your music is like blasting and it's like a good playlist that you made or that somebody else made. And like, that's so satisfying. Also because I'm realizing of like, I don't know, you're always like at home and like on the computer, but that like driving feels like a break at this point. So yes, hello. I think somebody just joined us. Yeah, hi Linnell. If you're joining us right now, we're just doing a check-in with name, pronouns, major, and your favorite feeling. Also, don't feel obligated, or nobody feel obligated to share. We'll leave the slide open and probably be here for like another couple of minutes, but if you don't want to share, then that's totally fine. And there's no pressure to share or participate or talk at all for this session.
So hi, I'm Jacob. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a double major in psych and LGBTQ plus studies. And my favorite feeling is probably like, those drop rides, like, I don't know, Six Flags, like that Superman ride, or just like the feeling you get from dropping really from like high. I don't know.
Oh, that's cool. Oh, things that we miss in COVID. That is a good feeling. Thank you for reminding us all that that like thing exists. I like haven't thought about that in so long, but that is a good thrill. Does anybody else want to share? No pressure either. My cat just joined me. That's why I'm moving my arm like this. Hello. Okay, cool. We'll move on. If you want to share in the chat, please feel free. Go ahead to do that. And we'll be monitoring the chat throughout. That works. Shannon.
Okay.
Jumping right in.
Yeah, jumping right in to a very complex topic, but we will do our best to break it down. So in order to begin the program, we have to think about the title of our work. So what does it mean to queer feminism? We want to share our definition, sort of how Selena and I have been thinking through the word queer and the ways that we will be using it throughout this program, so that it will kind of hopefully help us set the scene for the various topics we will be discussing throughout the month. Most of us are probably familiar with the term queer and its relationship to sexuality, right? We often see it as the Q in LGBTQIA+. Has a complicated and virulent past, and its reclamation in more recent years contains multiple meanings and uses. So for the purposes of this program, we propose using queer as a reference to identities and concepts that fall outside of our society's traditional norm. And so this definition of normal in our society is constructed around ideas of whiteness, heterosexuality, affluence, masculinity, physical ability, among many other things. So in queering this norm and in queering feminism, by tackling issues usually left out of conversation and by including the works of prevalent QT BIPOC activists, we begin to form a more inclusive and understanding community and political coalition, hence why all of us are gathered here today. For our session today, we're going to discuss two prevalent feminist scholars and how they queer what it means to be a feminist and to be a woman. Some questions just to kind of like consider, we're not answering these questions right now, just to consider throughout this session and through future sessions as we begin to queer our relationship to feminism are, how can we claim the label of feminism and when the depictions of feminism are wrapped up in hegemonic boxes of whiteness, heterosexuality, and affluence? And additionally, how can we claim the label of feminist while living and enjoying things that, living life, and enjoying things that may seem at odds with feminist ideology? We hope that this space today and future sessions provide sort of food for thought and a space for you all to process, be that verbally out loud or through our journaling portion of the session. But we're just super excited to explore this topic with you all.
Thank you, Shannon, for setting the backdrop. And we want this like whole thing to be interactive and collaborative. So if you have anything to say or a point, or you're like, this is what queer means to me, it's not out of place to share that or send that. Whatever definition of queer is to you, whatever that word means to you right now is just as valid as anything that we could find in a journal article, as our lived experiences. And we think that wisdom really comes from within. So whatever that is to you. So we'll be doing a brief introduction into both Gloria Anzaldúa and Roxanne Gay today. These are this week's activists, and we want to begin by grounding us in this concept of intersectionality, which may or may not be familiar, and it's okay either way. Yeah, and I want to share two quotes by each of these activists and women, and this is the one by Gloria Anzaldúa, who says, I am a wind-swayed bridge, a crossroad inhabited by whirlwinds. Gloria the facilitator, Gloria the mediator, straddling the walls between abysses. Your allegiance is to La Raza, the Chicano movement, say the members of my race. Or your allegiance is to the third world, say my Black and Asian friends. Your allegiance is to your gender, to women, say the feminists. Then there's my allegiance to the gay movement, to the socialist revolution, to the new age, to magic and the occult. And there's my affinity to literature, to the world of the artist. What am I? A third world lesbian feminist with Marxist and mystic leanings. They would chop me up into little fragments and tag each piece with a label. If you hate being read to, I am so sorry. Feel free to mute me for these slides, but we're gonna read that out loud for like accessibility. Feel free to also, no, go back. Thank you. Just read it on your own. And Roxanne Gay on intersectionality, here's one quote: "We need to stop playing privilege or oppression Olympics because we'll never get anywhere until we find more effective ways of talking through difference. We should be able to say, this is my truth, and have that truth stand without 100 clamoring voices shouting, giving the impression that multiple truths cannot coexist." So one example of this, right, is that queer means a million different things to each person who identifies as queer. They have different identities, the way that they practice their sexuality or even their self-expression and their identity is different, but they might all identify as queer, and that's cool. We also want to stress this concept of intersectionality when it comes to queering feminism. And feminism is not feminism, and it's not inclusive if it's not intersectional, right? But what does intersectionality mean? And on one hand, a more textbook and or educational definition of intersectionality is just an analytical framework for understanding how a person's social and political identities combine to create both, one, different modes of discrimination and privilege, but also to create a unique experience that's unique to their combination of identities. So you could boil it down to that creates unique forms of maybe of discrimination and experiencing privilege. We sometimes think about the different stereotypes that apply to, I'll use my own groups as an example, to Asian men versus Asian women, like even in dating, those tend to differ like widely based on one identity, right? So we have these unique combinations of discrimination. However, it can also lead to very unique experiences based on one person's holistic identity. Intersectionality is basically a mode to get at the in-between of somebody's experiences, and a lot of intersectional activists and feminist thought writers use intersectionality as a way to get at their own ethnic and or racial and sexuality groups because that was not represented in mainstream feminism, and so that needed to be queered and expanded. I also want to stress that in that definition of intersectionality, it includes somebody's social and political identities, and some people make the distinction between a social and political identity, because a social identity is something that you have because you exist. So I could say, okay, I am queer, I am Asian, I am this certain age. And a political or politicized identity means that there is a certain level of awareness and commitment to power struggles on behalf of that identity. And so a politicized identity, somebody might identify and say like, okay, I am Asian, but that's not a politicized identity of mine. I'm not really fighting for collective liberation of this subgroup. Other people would say like, your identity is automatically politicized, whether or not you like it. As a person of color living in the West, your identity is politicized because it's going to be talked about in mainstream media. You going to work is almost a political act, right? When you're an ethnic minority or a gender minority or sexuality minority who's out. So that political identity of yours, you can hold that in different ways and facets. Some people include that in their intersectionality, right? If I choose to engage in certain issues and I don't choose to engage in other issues. But I do want to stress that intersectionality includes you in all the fullness of your identities, whether or not you engage in a certain social movement or view yourself as an activist or not. So you being who you are is a political act in and of itself. It's an act of resilience. It's an act of joy. It's an act of celebrating yourself. And you don't have to do anything, right, to be that identity enough. You don't have to do anything but be yourself, try to take care of yourself, or even if you don't try to take care of yourself, you having that identity is the best and most valid way to have that identity. And that's what intersectionality really gets at, that you are just you, and that unique combination of your relationship with being you, that's enough. Okay, I know that was whiny, sorry for talking so much. We'll jump into the people who we're highlighting this week. And so one of them is Gloria Anzaldúa. She was a self-described Chicana dyke feminist. I don't speak Spanish. I'm barely bilingual, but I apologize for mispronouncing these things. Tahana Patlachi, poet, writer, and cultural theorist. She was an activist and leader in the Chicana and Chicano movement. She was also a leader in intersectional feminism and queer theory. And she created this term and or this space almost, and she wrote about this a lot, of Nepantla, which refers to in the middle, or Nepantlera, which refers to a threshold of people that move among conflicting worlds as they refuse to align themselves exclusively with any single individual group or belief system. And Gloria Anzaldúa grew up, I believe, in Texas along the US-Mexico border. And so her writing oftentimes focused on this in-between space between two different countries, two different worlds. Her most famous work is probably Borderlands or La Frontera, where she wrote about the US-Mexico border culture. And she described it as an open wound where the third world grates against the first world, and bleeds. And so she also refers to herself in this in the middle in a Nepantla identity of being in between a lot of different spaces of she's a feminist, but she's not heterosexual. She's a feminist, but she wasn't a white feminist at the time. And that was difficult, and or there's not a lot of terms or theory there for those identities. She also talks about mestizo consciousness. This is a concept that she writes about in her book, but basically what that is that it deconstructs the impact of patriarchy and colonialism on the Chicana psyche, reclaims indigenous spirituality and feminist cultural archetypes, and remaps the border zones created by empire. So I think that you could make a whole syllabus on this definition alone of what this is. What does it mean to remap the border zones created by empire, right? So we think about when a country founds itself displacing indigenous peoples, you're creating a fake or artificial border there and creating a distinction of now you're an American, you do not belong to Mexico, etc. That distinction there was created by somebody else, right? And she exists in the in-between. And she's like, I am both. I live in this space where I can cross over both ways. Same with the way that she would like to present herself or the way she practices her sexuality. Reclaiming indigenous spirituality, of course, and feminist cultural archetypes, right? And whether or not you fit into a mainstream mold of what an activist should be. These are the things that her work focused on. And I want to share a quote here as well, which is, I will no longer be made to feel ashamed of existing. I will have my voice, Indian, Spanish, white. I will have my serpent's tongue, my woman's voice, my sexual voice, my poet's voice. I will overcome the tradition of silence. And so one thing that really politically charged Gloria was she was the only Chicana individual in her high school advanced classes, and especially English classes, and she wanted to become a writer, but she was told that she could never do so because English was not her primary language, and she struggled with that throughout primary school. And now all of her work is always written in a mix of Spanish and English. And people always say, if you're going to read one of her books and you don't speak Spanish, have a Spanish dictionary nearby. And so Sanashi intentionally does that to create, to emulate the difficulty that she had going through the public school system of she constantly had to look up certain words in order to seem presentable enough. And now she's like, if you want to read my work, live in this in-between zone with me where I have both languages. And right, if you're bilingual, then you might also experience that certain things don't translate super well back and forth as a direct translation. I want to share a quick recording of her reading some of her work, if that's okay. I'm going to make sure that I'm sharing computer screen or sharing computer sound.
When we met, I fell into her eyes like falling into warm rock, blurting out everything, how my cousins took turns at night when I was 5, 8, 10. Her eyes asked for nothing, but I turned myself inside out, plucked my heart and offered it to her. She looked away. I hated the coaxing in my voice, that bitch whine, and then she said, bueno, just this once. It rained hard that day, and afterwards she sat up and stretched, arms and bare back glistening. The sounds of the ranas entered the room with the night. Both were deafening. I stood at the door of the heaven I thought out of reach. When I touched her, I could barely breathe, and the smell of her toasted almonds and yeast, I could never get near it enough, and the wanting making my arms weak. The taste of her, even now if I bring my fingers up to my nose, I get a whiff of her. Lightning scored the window panes. A brutal light hid my eyes, filling the room, surprising the sun in her face. She slit it back behind her eyes, but I'd seen it. And by the time thunder shook the mirror, something else had entered the room, and I knew she would leave me. Parts of her were walking out into the llovizna toward the lightning piercing the horizon. She lay beached on the white sand, and before the sweat dried on her body, I knew she needn't have done anything. One stroke of her hand on my belly, and I would have gone off again. But I lay on the white sheet, mouth full of sand, my face shut like a door. Somehow the thunder had gotten inside me, and I wanted to say, "I'm not your perra," a cheap shot, but it would have softened her mouth. By then I wanted nothing from her, had turned away and lay listening to the rain and the frogs. The birds had stopped singing. When her hand touched me, I almost screamed. I pulled back into myself, made myself numb, but the cat, her hand found me, and I, the mouse, had no more holes to hide in. I came to lose myself, and for that, I never forgave her.
So that's an excerpt of one of her work. I'm going to go back to screen sharing. Cool. I want to add one quick note about that book of Borderlands or La Frontera is it was banned in 2012 in the Tucson, Arizona school system because, and the literal citation is that because it advocated for ethnic solidarity instead of the treatment of pupils as individuals. And so I don't know, I think that speaks to, right, the importance of her work and its ability to bridge different ethnic groups together, but also like my fear at public education systems, and that was a literal citation of it advocated for ethnic solidarity instead of separating each individual student as an individual person for themselves, right? And like they couldn't experience a collective identity together. Okay, that was repealed in 2017, so some good news.
So for Roxane Gay, she is a writer, professor, editor, and social commentator. She's authored several best-selling novels and written a ton of articles, more than I will mention here today. But most notably are these four. They are Bad Feminist, which is a collection of essays that describes her relationship to the word feminist and sort of her experience growing up and understanding her identity. The second is Hunger, which is a personal memoir that is a reflection on her relationship to her weight in a fat-phobic society. Third is Difficult Women, which is a collection of short stories depicting the lives of women from varying perspectives and experiences. And Not That Bad, which is Dispatches from Rape Culture, is an anthology of stories new and old that depict what it is like to be a woman in a world where violence can sometimes feel inevitable. So through these novels that I've listed in other articles, it's clear that much of Roxane's writing and social commentary is intended to challenge traditional ideas of womanhood, feminism, and perfectionism through and asserting herself as a queer, fat, Black woman. I feel like it sort of goes back to what Celine was saying and the importance of community building and kind of coalition building is her intention. A lot of her writings are anthologies, right? So it's collections of stories from other women. So it's about finding those common experiences. I have a quote, one of my favorite quotes from Roxane's book, Bad Feminist. She says, "I embrace the label of bad feminist because I am human. I am messy. I am not trying to be an example. I am not trying to be perfect. I am not trying to say I have all the answers. I am not trying to say I'm right. I am just trying to support what I believe in, trying to do some good in this world, trying to make some noise with my writing while also being myself." And I feel like that relates a lot to what we're talking about in terms of queering feminism, this idea of perfectionism and that we have to have it all and do it all and be it all and never make a mistake. And I feel like that's an insane amount of pressure for any of us to take on, especially in our world where we're tackling so many different topics and issues and balancing our own lives. But I want to show a clip from a TED Talk given in 2015, in which Roxane discusses the concept of bad feminist, sort of how it came to be and how she's taken on the name. This is quintessential Roxane Gay, and it's a great place to begin looking into her ideologies as well as thinking about our own relationships to feminism, because after this, we'll be going into our journaling prompt session.
I am failing as a woman. I am failing as a feminist. I have passionate opinions about gender equality, but I worry that to freely accept the...
I am so sorry. I don't know why I did that. I'm trying to fix it. Oh, there we go.
violent, and they get to do so in a way that's safe.
So sorry. Yeah, is okay to talk to her going to this hospital.
She is here to answer.
What? Sorry?
That it autoplayed to the next video. That's the wrong one. Me too. So sorry, everyone.
Aha, thank you. I'm so sorry.
I am failing as a woman. I am failing as a feminist. I have passionate opinions about gender equality, but I worry that to freely accept the label of feminist would not be fair to good feminists. I'm a feminist, but I'm a rather bad one. Oh, so I call myself a bad feminist. Or at least I wrote an essay, and then I wrote a book called Bad Feminist, and then in interviews, people started calling me the bad feminist. So, what started as a bit of an inside joke with myself and a willful provocation has become a thing. Let me take a step back. When I was younger, mostly in my teens and 20s, I had strange ideas about feminists as hairy, angry, man-hating, sex-hating women, as if those are bad things. These days, I look at how women are treated the world over, and anger in particular seems like a perfectly reasonable response. But back then, I worried about the tone people used when suggesting I might be a feminist. The feminist label was an accusation. It was an F word and not a nice one. I was labeled a woman who doesn't play by the rules, who expects too much, who thinks far too highly of myself by daring to believe I am equal, superior to a man. You don't want to be that rebel woman until you realize that you very much are that woman and cannot imagine being anyone else. As I got older, I began to accept that I am indeed a feminist and a proud one. I hold certain truths to be self-evident. Women are equal to men. We deserve equal pay for equal work. We have the right to move through the world as we choose, free from harassment or violence. We have the right to easy, affordable access to birth control and reproductive services. We have the right to make choices about our bodies free from legislative oversight or evangelical doctrine. We have the right to respect. There's more. When we talk about the needs of women, we have to consider the other identities we inhabit. We are not just women. We are people with different bodies, gender expressions, faiths, sexualities, class backgrounds, abilities, and so much more. We need to take into account these differences and how they affect us as much as we account for what we have in common. Without this kind of inclusion, our feminism is nothing. I hold these truths to be self-evident, but let me be clear. I'm a mess. I am full of contradictions. There are many ways in which I'm doing feminism wrong. I have another confession. When I drive to work, I listen to thuggish rap at a very loud volume. Even though the lyrics are degrading to women, these lyrics offend me to my core. The classic Ying Yang Twins song, Salt Shaker, it is amazing. Make it work with your wet t-shirt, bitch, you gotta shake it till your camel starts to hurt. Think about it. Poetry, right? I am utterly mortified by my music choices. I firmly believe in man work, which is anything I don't want to do, including all domestic tasks, but also bug killing, trash removal, lawn care, and vehicle maintenance. I want no part of any of that. Pink is my favorite color. I enjoy fashion magazines and pretty things. I watch The Bachelor and romantic comedies, and I have absurd fantasies about fairy tales coming true. Some of my transgressions are more flagrant. If a woman wants to take her husband's name, that is her choice, and it is not my place to judge. If a woman chooses to stay home to raise her children, I embrace that choice too. The problem is not that she makes herself economically vulnerable in that choice. The problem is that our society is set up to make women economically vulnerable when they choose. Let's deal with that. I reject the mainstream feminism that has historically ignored or deflected the needs of women of color, working class women, queer women, and transgender women in favor of supporting white, middle, and upper class straight women. Listen, if that's good feminism, I am a very bad feminist. There's also this. As a feminist, I feel a lot of pressure.
Go ahead, Shannon.
No, you're fine. I was just going to say thank you for sharing that. And I hope that that's just one of my favorite. That was how I was introduced to Roxane Gay when I was in undergrad. And that TED Talk is still just like really influential and important to me. So I'm just happy to have shared it with you all. But we can move on to the next slide, which I think is our journal prompts.
Okay. So now here's like for the last 20 minutes of this space, we just wanted to give both a discussion. If you want to discuss this, then we're more than happy to have that discussion. If you prefer to just journal and reflect on your own, then feel free to do that on or off camera. Here are some journaling prompts based on the information we presented and based on some of the work of Gloria and Roxane. So what does queerness mean to you? What is your relationship with feminism and what do you want it to be? How was feminism presented to you in mainstream media / culture? And how do Gloria and Roxane interrupt this mainstream narrative and make it more inclusive? And so again, like we said, feel free to journal on this on your own and answer whatever you feel called to. If you just want to take a picture of this or write down these questions to revisit later, you can go ahead and do that. If you like, we would also invite you to share your thoughts on our community board. And so I'll go ahead and link that to the chat. Shannon, do you mind to put these questions in the chat as well? Cool. But maybe I also want to maybe do a temp check. So I'm going to stop sharing. Oh, cool. Hello, everyone. Now that I can see faces, can we do maybe like one sentence and or one word check-in of how you're feeling, what you're thinking about, and or if you're looking forward to journaling about any of these prompts that we'll put in the chat. I don't know, I'm doing well. I know Shannon and I were both really nervous for this, for like whatever reason, really excited, but also nervous. And now I want to journal about the prompt of what is my relationship with feminism, but what do I want that relationship to look like moving forward? So that's where I'm at.